Good evening. Tonight's journey takes us to a place called the Underwater City. So, snuggle up deep under your blankets, get comfortable, and prepare for a wonderful night of rest. Once you are all settled and warm, close your eyes. The city of Cremenos is a marvel, unlike any other city in the world. If you were to wake up in one of the many cozy apartments downtown, you might mistake your surroundings for the bustling heart of New York or Tokyo. When you looked out the window, you would see towering, glassy skyscrapers stretching high toward the heavens, casting long, cool shadows on the streets far below. And if you listened closely, you would hear the gentle, rhythmic hum of over 30 million people, all softly making their way to work. If you stood in the top penthouse suite at the corner of First Street and First Avenue, you might feel a moment of wonder. From this vantage point, you could gaze upon the Eiffel Tower and the Empire State Building, standing side by side. You see, Cremenos was built as a living mosaic, a collection of the world's greatest metropolises. A simple 15-minute stroll would take you past the needle-like spire of Toronto's CN Tower, the whimsical dancing house of Prague, and the soaring gateway arch of St. Louis. But what truly sets this city apart lies above. If you were to look up, you would never see fluffy white clouds lazily drifting by on a summer afternoon. Nor would you ever witness dark nimbostratus clouds gathering to herald a storm. In fact, stepping outside, you would never need an umbrella or a heavy jacket. Since the city's founding in the year 2300, every single day has been perfectly dry and pleasantly mild. This is because Cremenos is the world's first underwater city, a miracle born in the 23rd century when 30 nations united to create a new home. To create this architectural masterpiece, voted the most beautiful vacation destination for 45 years running, the founders looked to the past. While the city was inspired by the legend of Atlantis, they chose the name Cremenos from the Greek word meaning hidden. Down here, the climate is perfect, controlled by vast artificial lights that mimic the golden rise and setting of the sun. While much of the food arrives from the world above, lush farms at the city's edge grow enough to feed a population as vast as Shanghai. John was among the very first generation to be born in Cremenos. His parents had migrated to this sanctuary, resting on the ocean floor off the coast of Madagascar before he was born. As a child, John used to wonder about the world above the waves. He would listen, wide-eyed, to his parents' tales of road trips across America, stories of the mist rising from Yellowstone and the red expanse of the Grand Canyon. When he was younger, he begged them to take him to the surface. But as he grew into a teenager, that longing faded. He had seen enough films from around the globe to realize that Cremenos was just as beautiful as anywhere on Earth. For nearly 50 years, John has served as a window cleaner, a job he began when he was just 15. Every morning, he receives a list of locations, tasked with polishing the glass both inside the bustling streets and on the exterior of the great dome that protects them all. He spent his days driving his pickup truck, exploring every nook and cranny of this underwater metropolis. He must have traveled every side road and circled the edge of the glass dome 1,000 times. The city was modeled after 32 of the world's most famous capitals, and even though John had never stepped foot in the real Paris or Tokyo, he felt he knew them by heart. Beneath the waves. From what John understood, each district was a perfect mirror image of its original inspiration. Overall, Cremenos sprawled out, somewhere between the size of Singapore and Hong Kong. And now, with less than 6 months left before his retirement, John likely knew this city better than any soul alive. He knew exactly where to find the most mouth-watering slice of pizza in New York. He could point you to the specific rooftop in tiny Tokyo that offered the unparalleled view of the silver schools of herring, hundreds of thousands strong, shimmering past the glass during the day. He loved his life as a window washer. Every day was a new journey to a different corner of the city, a chance to meet the locals and learn fragments of their languages. Yet, as much as he enjoyed the work, he found himself daydreaming of retirement. He pictured himself lying on the sandy beaches of Little Lisbon or the Melbourne district. After a lifetime of washing the glass that separated them from the ocean, it would be nice to simply close his eyes, let the warm sand run through his fingers, and listen to the gentle, artificial call of the seagulls. Now that his time in the workforce was drawing to a close, it was his duty to pass the torch. Today was the day he would meet his successor. John's alarm chirped at its usual hour of 5 a.m. He took a deep, steadying breath before hitting snooze, twice. When it rang a third time, he finally climbed out of bed, his knees creaking in protest, and walked to the window of his small one-room apartment. He pulled back the curtains. The great artificial sun hadn't yet been ignited, but the streets below were alive with the soft neon glow of late-night clubs and bars, casting a gentle light into his room. He yawned, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He lived in the district modeled after Chicago. To give the area an authentic Windy City feel, giant fans hum high in the roof of the dome, creating gusts of air. It was the only place in Cremenos where you could feel a natural breeze against your skin. Other parts of the city had their own weather charms too. In the winter, in second Stockholm, city workers would spread synthetic snow along the streets, piling up banks next to the sidewalks and opening a skating rink that looked just like a frozen pond. In the summer months of second Seoul, sprinklers in the dome would turn on for a few hours, mimicking warm rain showers. If you were unlucky enough to get caught in them, your clothes would cling to your skin as you dashed home to dry off. Turning away from the window, John went to his cupboard. He poured a bowl of oats imported all the way from Canada and added a splash of milk fresh from the dairy farms at the edge of town. To finish his meal, he sprinkled in pieces of dried seaweed harvested by fishermen near the New Cairo district. After a brisk, cold shower to wake himself up, he slipped into his work uniform, a pair of well-worn denim overalls with his name carefully stitched onto the chest. By the time he took the elevator from the 37th floor down to the ground, the city's artificial dawn was beginning to break. The streetlights flickered off one by one, leaving the city in a peaceful hush, broken only by the quiet hum of an occasional taxi gliding by. He looked up toward the very peak of the dome. There, the faint glow of the real sun filtered down from the surface, miles above, turning the ocean water a deep, translucent green. John had a plan. After his retirement, he was going to take a submarine cruise up to the real London. His friends often told him he should save his money and just visit the local London district instead. But John felt he had to see the above-ground world at least once in his life. He wanted to ride the London Eye and see a skyline without the Eiffel Tower or the Empire State Building standing right next to it. He dreamed of visiting all 32 original cities just to compare them to the underwater versions he knew so well. Leaving his apartment, John walked along the quiet street to the parking garage and climbed into his pickup truck, which was packed tight with cleaning supplies. He navigated through the Cape Town district, crossed into Prague, and then merged onto the freeway heading toward Paris. He turned on the radio to catch the morning news, smiling at how the broadcast language shifted seamlessly as he drove through different districts. He took the exit within sight of the Eiffel Tower and drove until he reached the far south end of the city, a place affectionately known as Little Lisbon. This was one of his favorite places. To him, the people here seemed kinder and the atmosphere more relaxed. The district was built around an artificial harbor that flowed right up to the edge of the dome. There was a sandy beach, but no waves crashed against the shore. Instead, the golden sand ended abruptly at the glass wall, where the deep, real ocean pressed against the city. John cruised slowly through the old quarter of Little Lisbon with his window down. The main road was paved with cobblestones and lined with charming white buildings topped with bright red-orange roofs. In the soft morning light, shop owners were already out, straw brooms in hand, rhythmically sweeping away the sand that had drifted into their doorways from the nearby beach. Most of the shopkeepers recognized John immediately. After all, he visited this quarter at least once a week. They paused their morning sweeping to wave at him, their faces lighting up with wide, welcoming smiles. He eased his truck into a spot right in front of his favorite cafe and stepped inside. The owner, a kind woman in her late 30s, waved the moment she saw him. "Bon dia," she greeted him warmly, already sliding a tiny porcelain cup under the spout of the hissing espresso machine. She buttered 2 thick slices of fresh bread from the display case and brought them over to his table. They had been friends for years, sharing the quiet comfort of these morning routines. She had moved here from Lagos, Nigeria, almost a decade ago. Her husband was an engineer, currently working hard to help construct the city's ambitious new expansion in the far west. It was a topic of much speculation. No one knew for sure what the new district was going to be, but rumors swirled that it would be a South American city, perhaps Sao Paulo or Bogota. John, however, held a different hope. Ever since he had stumbled upon some breathtaking photographs of Argentina in a magazine last fall, he had been crossing his fingers that the new district would be Buenos Aires. John lingered for nearly half an hour, savoring his buttered bread and coffee while poring over the local newspaper. The front page was dominated by an article debating the possibilities for the new development. Opinions were divided. Some were convinced it would be Taipei, while others swore it would be Mexico City. John, however, held a different hope. Ever since he had stumbled upon some breathtaking photographs of Argentina in a magazine last fall, he had been crossing his fingers that the new district would be Buenos Aires. John lingered for nearly half an hour, savoring his buttered bread and coffee while poring over the local newspaper. The front page was dominated by an article debating the possibilities for the new development. Opinions were divided. Some were convinced it would be Taipei, while others swore it would be Mexico City. John, however, held a different hope. Ever since he had stumbled upon some breathtaking photographs of Argentina in a magazine last fall, he had been crossing his fingers that the new district would be Buenos Aires. John lingered for nearly half an hour, savoring his buttered bread and coffee while poring over the local newspaper. The front page was dominated by an article debating the possibilities for the new development. Opinions were divided. Some were convinced it would be Taipei, while others swore it would be Mexico City.
As he read, a group of children tumbled past, kicking a soccer ball back and forth and shouting excitedly to one another in Portuguese. The sound of their carefree laughter was a balm to John's soul. It transported him back to his own childhood, playing soccer in the streets of Second Rome with his old friends Leonardo and Andrea. After breakfast, John drove to the very edge of Little Lisbon, where a handful of luxury resorts lined the coast. He parked his truck and walked barefoot across the soft sand until he reached the massive glass wall that separated the city from the crushing depths of the ocean. Inside the dome, seagulls wheeled overhead, diving at the sand to snatch up stray French fries left behind from the evening before. The city didn't have a complete ecosystem just yet. That was a complex project the planners were still refining. The eventual goal was to introduce wildlife specific to each region. But for now, the city was home mostly to urban survivors like pigeons, mice, and squirrels. Though the Melbourne district did boast a few kangaroos. John sat in the sand, curling his knees to his chest. He took a few quiet moments to collect his thoughts before his workday officially began at 9 a.m. Outside the thick glass bubble, nature put on a show. Thousands of 6-inch blue fish darted by, their silver bellies catching the city's artificial light and glimmering like stars. Beyond them lay a coral reef, a vibrant tapestry of almost every color of the rainbow. Occasionally, if he looked closely, he would catch the curious eye of a sea turtle or a dolphin peering back at him from the deep. Nearby, a series of hidden nozzles buried in the sand hissed softly, releasing puffs of air scented with the heavy, briny smell of salt water, a synthetic touch to make the illusion complete. He inhaled the scent deeply, grounding himself. Standing up, he stretched his hands high overhead. Then he gathered his tools, his container of cleaning solution, his retractable squeegee, and his bucket of water. He approached the dome, but before he wiped away a single smudge, he began the most vital part of his job. Inspecting the glass for even the slightest hint of damage. In his 50 years on the job, John had only ever discovered a single crack, and even that hadn't penetrated all the way through. The glass was an engineering marvel, more than 3 feet thick, designed to withstand the crushing, immense pressure of the ocean. Still, caution was paramount. Every now and then, small sections of the dome were proactively replaced to ensure the city remained a watertight sanctuary. By the time the great artificial suns at the city's zenith reached their maximum brightness, bathing the streets in daylight, John had already finished polishing the first section on his list. He was working on the second section, his squeegee slick with soapy water, when he felt a presence. Someone was standing quietly behind him. He turned to see a boy with a rich, dark chocolate complexion and curly black hair. He couldn't have been a day older than 16. John studied him for a moment. In a strange way, he felt he was looking at a reflection of his own youth. "Are you my new assistant?" John asked gently. The boy nodded. He pulled a hand from the pocket of his blue shorts to shake John's hand. He was striking for his age, already taller than John, likely just a hair under 6 feet, with broad shoulders that hinted at strength. John gripped his hand firmly and introduced himself. "Don't you have to go to school today? How old are you, son?" Teo replied that his name was Tayo. He explained that he was being homeschooled. His family had just moved to Cremenos from Porto, the historic city in the world above. His parents wanted him to work mornings to learn responsibility, planning to teach him their lessons in the evenings after they returned from their own jobs. Teo was about the same age John had been when he first picked up a squeegee. And even though they looked nothing alike on the surface, something about the boy's shy, quiet mannerisms tugged at John's memory. John hadn't been homeschooled, but he remembered the loneliness of his own childhood, the difficulty he had had making friends. It wasn't until he started washing windows, moving through the city, meeting strangers, that he truly found his voice. Looking at Tayo, I wondered if history was repeating itself. Perhaps this boy would follow in his footsteps and find his own path in this job for the next half-century. It didn't sound like the most glamorous career in the city, but John knew the truth. It was one of the most vital. In their hands rested the safety of more than 30 million souls. John began to teach Tayo the trade secrets. He explained the best way to hunt for weaknesses in the wall. Shine a flashlight against the thick glass at an angle. If anything shimmered or caught the light in an unusual way, it demanded immediate investigation. The boy listened with an intensity that impressed John, speaking only when asked about his own life. Together, they worked through the morning, rhythmically cleaning the glass along the shoreline and scanning the dome for any sign of trouble. For John, it was a pleasant change. After years of solitude, where conversations were fleeting moments with passers-by, it was nice to have a companion by his side. By noon, the beach had transformed. It was alive, buzzing with the chatter of languages from every corner of the globe. Even though swimming was impossible here, the sands were packed with families and couples. Some lay back to soak up the artificial rays, others tossed frisbees, while many simply pressed their faces to the glass, ogling the magnificent marine life drifting by outside. Through it all, Tayo watched John's every move with reverence, as if John were a master painter creating a masterpiece rather than a man wielding a squeegee. When they finally paused for lunch, John turned to the boy. "Tell me," he said, "about Portugal." As they sat on a towel in the warm sand, eating sandwiches John had packed, Tayo's eyes lit up. He spoke of Porto with a deep longing, calling it the most beautiful city on earth, a place every person should see at least once before they die. "And what do you think of it here so far?" John asked. Tayo hesitated. "I'm not sure yet," he admitted quietly. "There are beautiful parts, but I still worry about being underwater." John chuckled softly. He picked up a smooth stone from the beach and tossed it casually against the dome. It bounced off harmlessly, not leaving even a scratch. "There are 3 solid feet of reinforced glass between us and the ocean," John assured him. "And honestly, we're probably safer down here than anyone up there. At least we never have to worry about getting struck by lightning." As they laughed, a woman approached them, carrying a woven basket. She introduced herself as Tayo's mother. With a smile, she unpacked a thermos of hot coffee, freshly grilled sardines, and homemade bread. "How is my son doing so far?" she asked, looking between them. John smiled warmly. "He seems like a hard worker. I'm sure he's going to do a fine job." The woman nodded proudly, patting her son affectionately on the shoulder. The woman patted her son's arm affectionately before turning her attention to John. "And you," she asked, "how long have you lived in this city?" When John replied that he hadn't left since the day he was born, her eyes widened in genuine shock. She muttered something softly in Portuguese, clearly harboring the same deep-seated fears of the ocean as her son. But John just smiled and offered his lightning joke again, assuring her that they were perfectly safe. To shift the mood, he asked her to describe Porto. She lit up, eager to share memories of her home. Though she hadn't been gone long, the passion in her voice betrayed how deeply she missed it. She spoke of wine tastings along the Douro River on warm summer nights, and of the many bistros serving fresh cured ham and cheese. She pointed to the red-tiled roofs of the nearby resorts, noting how they mimicked the skyline she loved, and finished by telling John that he hadn't truly lived until he walked across the Dom Lewis Bridge, which offered the most spectacular view in all of Europe. John agreed that he would love to see it someday. In return, he described the magic of his own world: nighttime walks along the Han River in Second Seoul, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the Parisian district, and the breathtaking sight of a full-grown humpback whale gliding silently past the glass. After the meal, the woman said her goodbyes, and John and Teo returned to the shoreline. As they worked, John continued to pass down the tricks of the trade, teaching Teo to always start high and work his way down, so the dirty water wouldn't streak the parts they had just perfected. They worked in rhythm for most of the afternoon until they reached a section of the dome completely obscured by a shadow. It was an octopus, the size of a school bus. It was the largest specimen John had ever seen. Each tentacle was as thick as a man's leg, suctioned tight against the dome. The giant creature looked at them with an expression of almost human-like boredom. Teo laughed nervously when he saw it, joking that they would have to be the ones to ask it to move. "Actually," John said, "that is our job." Teo gave him a bewildered look. As if it knew they were talking about it, the octopus suddenly pushed off the glass, trailing a stream of bubbles and leaving behind a massive cloudy smear of slime on the exterior. "We need to wash that off." "From the outside." "From the outside?" Teo asked, eyes wide. "How?" John erupted in laughter. Teo was in for a treat. Swimming outside the city dome was one of John's absolute favorite things to do. There was nothing in the world more peaceful. "I'll show you," John said, leading the boy back to the truck. They climbed in and drove out of Little Lisbon, heading toward New York, a district designed as a near-exact replica of Manhattan Island. The traffic was heavy, true to the original city's spirit, so it took them nearly half an hour to find parking near Central Park. They left the heavy cleaning gear in the truck, taking only the retractable squeegee. As they walked into the park, the difference was clear. The Cremenos version was smaller than the original because it bordered the very edge of the city. Yet, all around them, people sat on the grass, chatting and enjoying the afternoon, unaware of the adventure the two window washers were about to begin. As they walked, John's ears picked up a melody of languages: Spanish, Swahili, French, Mandarin, and Russian. He didn't speak any of them fluently, but after a lifetime in this melting pot, he knew the rhythm of each well enough to identify them. They followed the curve of the dome until they reached the end of the park. There stood a magnificent structure made almost entirely of glass, shaped elegantly like the Taj Mahal. John told Tayo that this was the submarine terminal, the city's gateway. It was the main hub for anyone arriving from North America or Australia. Through the massive windows, John pointed out into the dark blue, where sleek submarines docked and departed, gliding through the water like silent airplanes. They entered the building, which buzzed with the energy of an international airport. They passed a busy food court lined with popular chains and a security checkpoint where travelers waited for their transcontinental voyages. But John led Tayo past the crowds to the quiet far end of the terminal. This section felt more like a calm hotel lobby, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering the best possible view of the ocean life outside. Here, in the employee sector, they prepared for their exit. John helped Tayo step into his heavy scuba suit and showed him exactly how to secure his air tank. Once they were geared up, they approached the airlock. They stepped into a small, windowless chamber, the heavy door sealed shut behind them, leaving them in darkness for a heartbeat. Then the outer vents opened. Water flooded in with a loud, rushing gurgle, rising quickly. When it reached their necks, they pushed off the floor and swam out of the chamber, drifting into the open ocean. The rushing sound stopped instantly. Suddenly, the world became completely, beautifully silent, save for the rhythmic sound of their own breathing. A gentle current caught them, pulling them softly toward a school of fish that scattered like silver confetti as they approached. Some of the fish brushed harmlessly against John's arms and legs before darting frantically away into the deep. John and Tayo swam along the curved edge of the city until they reached a spot between New York and Little Lisbon that was clouded with algae. John gently scrubbed it away with his squeegee, clearing the view before they continued on to the area where the giant octopus had left its mark. Hovering in the water, John handed the squeegee to Tayo, letting the boy take the lead on cleaning the glass. John let himself relax, surrendering to the weightlessness of the ocean. Going outside the dome was always John's favorite part of the job. Out here, suspended in the blue, he felt like an astronaut, completely isolated from the world as if he were the last human on Earth. He watched the sea life drift by as Tayo worked. A school of glowing fish passed between them, a mesmerizing ribbon of neon pink, green, yellow, and purple. They were razor thin. When they turned to face John, they almost seemed to vanish completely, invisible until they turned their bright, colorful sides back toward him. A squid drifted past, lazily propelling itself through the water, its tentacles dancing beneath it like ribbons in the wind. It settled softly onto the glass to rest, but with a gentle wave of his hand, John ushered it back into the blue. Unable to speak in the deep silence, John simply pointed, directing Tayo's gaze to the massive coral reef that hugged the city's foundation. It was a living garden of stone and color, a rainbow growing from the sea floor, shifting from deep, velvet reds to vibrant electric greens. Countless creatures found shelter here. Strands of seaweed swayed lazily in the current, and tiny fish, smaller than a pinky finger, darted through the fronds while larger predators watched patiently from above. John paused to admire a delicate pink sea anemone, its petals pulsing as it filtered the water atop a lonely rock. Suddenly, a shadow glided over him. A sea turtle, ancient and graceful, drifted by and fixed one dark eye on John. The natural black markings across its face gave it a stern, almost grumpy impression, but its demeanor was entirely peaceful. From head to tail, the giant was nearly as long as John himself, yet it moved with an elegance John could only envy. With a single, gentle stroke of its powerful flippers, it banked upward, ascending toward the distant sunlight. John followed its path with his eyes. Down here, the water was a deep, mysterious indigo, but far above, near the surface, it lightened to a brilliant, crystalline teal. As he watched, a massive school of thousands of fish passed overhead, blocking the light like a moving cloud. For a moment, the ocean darkened before the school vanished into the endless blue. In the quiet that followed, a curious creature appeared, a solitary fish with a back of bright lemon yellow and a front of shocking fuchsia. It looked almost magical, as if two different fish had been stitched together by a whimsical artist. As the oddity swam past, John noticed movement near the reef, two sleek dolphins playing in the current. John glanced at Tayo. Even behind the heavy diving mask and regulator, the boy's joy was unmistakable. His eyes crinkled in a wide, awestruck smile at the magical scene before him. But then, one of the dolphins broke away from the reef and approached them. It gently bumped its smooth gray nose against John's leg. It seemed friendly at first, but then the dolphin nudged him again, harder this time. The movement wasn't playful, it felt insistent, almost urgent. It realized the dolphin had misunderstood. The creature thought John was drowning and was frantically trying to push him toward the air. Smiling behind his regulator, John stopped resisting and allowed the dolphin to guide him upward. He broke the surface with a splash, his head bobbing in the open air. He spat out his regulator and gazed around. It had been years since he at last felt the true ocean breeze on his face. They were more than 300 miles from the nearest land, so the view was one of endless rolling blue. Seagulls called out overhead, their white wings catching the sun. The only other shape breaking the undulating horizon was a massive cargo ship far off in the distance, leaving a faint trail of smoke as it churned across the world. After a moment of fresh air, John slipped back beneath the waves. He found Tayo swimming alongside the coral reef, mesmerized by the thousands of fish darting through the water. A handful of other divers were exploring the area, and one gave John a friendly thumbs up as he drifted past. Beckoning for Tayo to follow, John kicked his fins, and together they ascended toward the very peak of the glass dome. They rested there, hovering near the pinnacle of the highest skyscrapers in New York. From this vantage point, they looked down upon the city like giants. They could see the perfect green rectangle of Central Park, a stark, vibrant contrast to the gray and steel buildings surrounding it. Far below, the people were nothing more than specks in suits rushing along the sidewalks. However, the yellow-orange taxis were unmistakable, moving bumper to bumper in a silent river of traffic. The thick glass completely blocked the noise of the city. John knew there were horns honking and engines revving, but out here, it was muffled by the weight of the water. That was why he loved being on this side of the glass. The silence turned the chaotic city into a peaceful, moving painting, like watching a strange, busy universe from the outside. The pair swam on, drifting toward the Little Lisbon district where they had met that morning. From the outside, the contrast was striking. Here, the jagged steel skyline was replaced by a sea of warm, reddish-orange terracotta roofs sitting atop bone-white buildings. Leafy trees dotted the winding streets, and on a prominent hill sat a square castle with a beautiful open courtyard. Along the beach, families played and relaxed, while couples walked hand in hand, leaving temporary footprints in the dry white sand. Patches of tall yellow grass waved gently at the edge of the beach, bordering a long wooden boardwalk that stretched away from the sand. Compared to the frenetic energy of New York, this part of the city looked as peaceful as a sleepy seaside village. Tayo swam closer to the dome. He pressed his hand against the glass and pointed excitedly toward a cluster of houses in the distance, buildings that shared the same white frames and red roofs as their neighbors. John nodded, understanding immediately. That was Tayo's home. John waved for Tayo to follow, and they continued their orbit around the city. They swam until the architecture shifted again, transforming into the sleek, futuristic lines of Second Seoul. This area looked even more modern than Manhattan, a testament to glass and light. At the very edge of the district flowed the serene, artificial waters of the Han River. A series of elegant bridges spanned the water, marking the boundary where the sleek modernism of Second Seoul gave way to the borders of Lisbon. Rows of pristine white condominium buildings seemed to stretch on for miles. Each one was identical, rising at least 30 stories into the artificial sky. But rising above them all like a blue jewel was the Lotte World Tower. It stood so tall that its spire hovered only a few feet from the roof of the dome itself. It felt close enough that, if someone were brave enough to stand on the very tip, they could simply reach up and press their palm against the glass that held back the ocean. John and Tayo swam upward until they reached the absolute apex of the dome. From this dizzying height, looking straight down, the city revealed its true design. Directly in the center lay a perfectly circular pond, roughly the size of a city block in New York. From this angle, Cremenos looked like a giant bullseye. A grand roundabout encircled the central pond, and from there,
8 equidistant main roads branched outward in opposite directions, like the sturdy spokes of a wheel. The city was a geometric masterpiece. The space between each spoke was a pie-shaped wedge, and each wedge was further divided into 4 distinct districts, totaling 32. The layout was precise. The tip of the wedge, the innermost ring, held one district. The middle section held a second, and the widest part of the wedge, the outer ring, housed 2 mini-cities side by side. In total, 16 districts formed the massive outer circle, while 8 districts made up the middle ring, and 8 more formed the intimate inner circle. Floating there, suspended above it all, it was easy to understand why Cremenos had been voted the most beautiful destination in the world for 45 years running. It wasn't just the breathtaking view of the ocean outside, it was the wonder of the world inside. Here, you could experience every style of human architecture from every corner of the globe, all in one single, harmonious place. John's eyes drifted to the inner ring, where a slice of London sat nestled just south of the artificial Thames River. Below them, the London Eye turned in a lazy, hypnotic rhythm, offering its passengers a slow-motion view of the world. Just across the artificial Thames River lay Beijing. Here, the skyline was denser, a forest of state-of-the-art skyscrapers reaching for the dome. Yet amidst the sleek glass and steel, the vibrant red and green curves of traditional temples stood out, grounding the future in the past. Next to Beijing sat Madrid, a district that looked completely different from its neighbors. There were no towering giants here. Instead, the city was composed of low, warm-colored buildings tightly packed together in square blocks, many of them centered around open-air courtyards. Even from this height, John could imagine the life teeming inside those squares. Children playing tag, fresh laundry fluttering on clotheslines, and families gathering for a meal in the open air. In the heart of the district, the great soccer stadium pulsed with energy. Even from the top of the dome, John could see the parking lot filled with tiny cars and lines of eager fans waiting to get inside. Beside Madrid lay Rome, an island of ancient history. The Colosseum stood proud and weathered, a striking contrast to the modern metropolis surrounding it. Completing this inner circle were the distinct skylines of Berlin, Montreal, Stockholm, and finally, Chicago, the district John had called home for his entire life. Floating in the silence, Tayo gently patted John on the shoulder and gave him a thumbs up. John returned the gesture with a slow, knowing nod. This view, this was why he stayed. Whenever the routine of city life became too much, John came here to float above it all. Even though he had never traveled, never stepped foot on a plane or a real train, he felt as though he had visited the entire world. It wasn't just the sights of the buildings that gave him that worldly feeling. It was the knowledge that people from every corner of the globe had come together to build this miracle beneath the sea. Even back when he was in high school, working his first shifts as a glass cleaner, he could walk down a street and hear a dozen languages mixing in the air. He realized that even if he closed his eyes and plugged his ears, he could navigate this world by scent alone. When he drifted past Montreal, the water seemed to carry the savory, comforting warmth of rich gravy melting over cheese curds and fries. Passing Prague, the sharp, vinegary tang of sauerkraut mingled with the hearty aroma of roasted pork and soft dumplings. Paris was unmistakable, a sweet symphony of butter drifting from flaky croissants and crusty baguettes fresh from the oven. Stockholm greeted him with the savory scent of meatballs glazed in sweet lingonberry. In New Delhi, the air hummed with a complex, musky blend of toasted spices and curry. And in Seoul, the punch of garlic and gochu peppers was so potent you could almost taste the tang of fermented kimchi just by breathing. Even in the chaos of New York, cutting through the mix of city scents was the sweet, nostalgic aroma of freshly baked apple pie. Finally, reluctantly, John and Tayo swam back to the airlock. They shed their heavy gear, dried off, and stepped back into the hum of the city. You finally had a chance to see it, I said softly, to see how beautiful the city can be from the outside. What'd you think? Tayo laughed, a sound of pure joy. You were right, John. It might actually be the most beautiful city in the world. The boy's eyes shone with excitement as he made a vow. He wanted to explore every single one of the 32 districts of Cremenos. He planned to visit a different one every week. John smiled and nodded slowly. There was something deeply familiar about the boy's enthusiasm. He knew it wouldn't be long before Teo started picking up the local languages, becoming a regular at cafes in every corner of the dome. Teo shook John's hand firmly before running off toward the beach where they had first met. Above them, the great artificial sun began to dim, shifting from blinding white to deep golds and burning oranges to replicate a perfect sunset. John climbed into his pickup truck and drove quietly through Manhattan until he reached the London district. He bought a ticket for the London Eye and rode the Ferris wheel alone. As he reached the top, the light spread across Cremenos at all once, bathing the entire underwater metropolis in a dreamy amber hue. He thought about the future. When he retired and Teo took over his route, John decided he would finally buy a ticket to ride the real London Eye. Of course, he knew in his heart that nowhere in the world was as magical as Cremenos, but he still wanted to see a real sunset, one not created by timers and bulbs. Just as Teo hungered to visit every section of this city, John felt the urge to visit every inspiration behind it. Maybe, someday, he would see them all for himself. On this note, our story ends. Good night and sweet dreams.